Wait. New Jack will be in WWE 2K25. New Jack! The guy that tried to make another guy, Vic Grimes, end up like Owen Hart. That guy gets to be in a new WWE game, yet Chris Benoit gets nothing. I'll get back to New Jack, but first I gotta give a recap on Chris Benoit and the brain damage discussion.
Most people don't know that the man had dementia, a type of brain damage. Most people don't know that in his autopsy, his brain was the equivalent of an 80-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Now, on one hand, I can't blame them because of this certain company that still to this day has most eyes on them. And we're going to use code names for this just in case. And I started to learn how that affects not only wrestlers, but also football players, boxers, and by that extent, MMA fighters. Ever since then, that's when I respected the entire wrestling business and became a fan. Now back to his autopsy. We wouldn't even have this knowledge if it wasn't for Christopher Nowinski, a former wrestler over Mount Olympus, who retired early because he started showing symptoms. Now keep in mind, back in those days, there was no wellness policy. That's the worst part of the situation, that Mount Olympus didn't have a wellness policy until the last minute. And it was not only after Chris Benoit's death, but Eddie Guerrero's death. So to this day, Mount Olympus doesn't talk about brain damage because old man Zeus is more concerned about corporate sponsors and the corporate image instead of the safety of his own workers. And here's the worst thing about it. You know how he could have saved face? Keep the positive image on the company? Have a brain damage awareness month. In fact, have that keep going for a year. And depending on how old Chris' oldest son David was, and yes, he has an older son, give him a contract, bring him in when he's old enough, give him a U.S. title push, have that go on, and once brain damage, the knowledge of brain damage is in more people's minds at that point, then induct not only Chris, but the whole family into the Hall of Fame. But years too late now. And at this point, that will never happen as long as old man Zeus is the one in charge.
Okay, quite a recap. That's not even the whole video. So first off, back to Christopher Nowinski. When you look at him back in the day, he looked like a prototype Bryan Danielson. He founded the Concussion Legacy Foundation. He is definitely the Bennett Omalu of professional wrestling. And yet he hasn't been in a WWE game since WWE Raw 2. And this man still isn't inducted into WWE's Hall of Fame, even though he saved more wrestlers' lives than DDP. That's messed up too. Also, in an old interview from MVP, he talked about the fact that Chris Benoit used to black out and didn't remember a thing. Here's some of that clip. I couldn't find it on YouTube. It used to be there. I don't know if it's still there or it's just buried under a lot of new videos now, but I found it on Dailymotion.
He was my friend and he was my mentor. And the guy that I knew wouldn't have done that. But I also remember lots of times when Chris and I were in the ring and he would completely black out. He couldn't remember things. And it would happen all the time. So afterwards we find out that he had the brain of a 70-year-old man with multiple concussions. And, you know, when people all the time snap, it happens. People snap, they lose their mind and they do something horrific. And I can't discount. I mean, I remember I spent time with him and his family, and I saw the love, and I saw the interaction.
Now on to New Jack. And he's actually part of this brain damage discussion because I recently found out he had it. So we gotta talk about the match he is notorious for, and I damn well can't show the footage. I'll just play the audio.
Oh no, please no!
That match is still on YouTube, and it's 14 years old. New Jack deliberately did that. Now, it's tough to see the tables in this picture, but the way that match was supposed to go, he was supposed to drop him straight down. So he lands on the tables and then the rest of the mat. So his fall is somewhat softened. I mean, that would still hurt like hell. But the guy would have been okay. That's how the match was supposed to go. New Jack tried to throw him to the solid ground. That was an attempted murk. The crowd and the commentators saw that shit. Vic Grimes was freaking blessed that night. I think the match was that night. Because he landed on the ropes. And the ropes definitely softened his landing way more than the tables. Those ropes saved his life. Angels were out there in the ring. Now we gotta talk about what caused this, as this match was a rematch. New Jack and Vic Grimes had a match before, and Vic Grimes, who was 300 pounds, landed on him, landed on his head. Yeah, that's bad. That screwed him up for the rest of his life. So New Jack wanted to get revenge. He wanted to give his receipt. But there's a way to handle that. I can understand giving Vic his receipt. In wrestling, if somebody hits you legit when that's not supposed to happen, you can hit them back. Here's one big example of that. Farouk and Ahmed. Mark Henry talked about this. Ahmed was a pain to work with. He injured Farouk. When he recovered, he came back. He was pissed. Everyone in the locker room knew he was freaking pissed. And they had another match. And Farouk beat the smack out of him. But at the same time, they worked with that for the match. Nobody got murked, okay? In fact, at WrestleMania, Travis Scott had to watch out because Cody's going to give him his receipt for busting his eardrum and giving him a black eye. You don't handle it like this. Now, when it comes to the extreme hardcore matches, I would have understood, okay, back then, a legit chair shot to the head. Or constantly whacking him with a candlestick. Or doing a thumbtack spot that wasn't planned. All that would have been fine. Not attempted murk. And New Jack straight up said it was deliberate. In Dark Side of the Ring.
I tased the shit out of him. You're like, Jack, I can't feel my legs. I said, you ain't gonna need them. Bums away.
No remorse, no regrets. This is one dude in the wrestling business I will never respect. And guess what? Vic Grimes is outliving him. Who's laughing now, huh? In that Dark Side of the Ring clip, it doesn't sound like those two squashed the beef. Now back to MVP's interview, he also mentioned that he understood why WWE erased Chris Benoit back then, but still do now, talking about that WWE had to protect their brand, protect their image. So you think about that. Think about their image. Think about their high standards. Yet they add New Jack. I know Triple H is running things now, but still. And also, after New Jack's passing, WWE acknowledged him on their freaking Twitter. It's one thing when Paul Heyman or Devon talk about him, other ECW guys, that's one thing. But WWE is another. And I almost forgot to talk about this. The other reason, I guess I gotta say it now, WWE don't acknowledge brain damage is because, well, old man Zeus knew he'd lose lawsuits. Here's someone else that had brain damage, Jimmy Snuka. Which I also didn't know until a few years ago because someone told me that Jimmy Snuka's wife, his second wife, Carol, tried to sue over head-related injuries. In fact, she wasn't the only one. There was a class action lawsuit. They tried to take it to the Supreme Court, but it was swept under the rug. Well, we clearly know why that happened, huh?
So think about the image WWE tends to uphold. Think of their standards. Yet with that standard, New Jack is in a new WWE game. Yet Chris Benoit isn't. They still don't acknowledge him. They don't even acknowledge his oldest son. The rest of the business does. Especially, Chris Jericho and Chavo Guerrero. But still, like everyone else acknowledges David Benoit, but not WWE. That seems hypocritical. And I should be freaking pissed. But Triple H must know that when that DLC comes out, it's going to be problematic. It's going to be a PR nightmare. Many other people will be asking the same questions as me and still have the same point. That with WWE standards, how is New Jack of all people in a new WWE game? So at that point, or sometime before it, Triple H must be planning something. Maybe a brain damage awareness month like I talked about before. Or you know what would be funny? If WWE had a Chris Benoit Cup. And it wouldn't be a knockoff of AEW's Owen Hart Cup. It would be more like making up for missing out on that opportunity. Owen Hart's wife went to AEW instead. But if they could do something like that with someone else, I'm sure they'd take the opportunity.